Welcome to the latest episode of the KPW podcast, where we talk to those in sports, including authors. Sometimes we delve into other topics such as education and customer service, but this time it's all about hockey. You can catch previous episodes in your favorite podcast player, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many others. And don't forget to subscribe, share, comment, and leave a rating and review. Well, the NHL season has just begun, and my guest today is Kirk McKnight, author of The Voices of Hockey. Broadcasters reflect on the fastest game on earth. When the audiobook version, I understand, is being released or has been released earlier this year, and Kirk McKnight has interviewed the legends behind the mic, the ones who call the game and shape how we remember it. We're talking about the voices that bring the ice to life, the stories behind the calls, and what makes a great broadcast unforgettable. If you have ever felt goosebumps from a good call or chills from a sudden silence, this episode is for you. Well, Kurt, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, Kurt, The Voices of Hockey first came out in 2016 with that iconic photo of a fight between goalies Mike Vernon and Patrick Waugh. I know The Voices of Baseball was released before that, but more recently, the audiobook version of The Voices of Hockey dropped. So, what got you into, or what got you started on writing these books, and what made you want to bring The Voices of Hockey to audio?
Well, I feel a lot of writing a book, especially a nonfiction book, depends on credibility. And, I'm not necessarily any sports athlete myself. And though I know plenty enough about hockey and baseball, I don't know nearly as much as somebody who's versed in it 162 games a year, or in hockey 82 games a year for 30, 40 years. So considering the fact that broadcasters probably outlast almost everybody in the organization, even the presidents and owners sometimes. If you want to get a good fountain about a team, about a venue, about a city, about the fandom, the best place a lot of times will be the broadcasters because they're the storytellers. And if you're trying to write a book that's telling a story, you want to incorporate storytellers. So that's what I did, starting with the Voices of Baseball back in 2015, and then continued with the Voices of Hockey. And then all along the way since then, I've gone back and updated it with newer and fresher material, more broadcasters, more moments that have happened in the NHL and Major League Baseball, to the point where it's right now, I feel like it's the most complete that I'm gonna ever make it in this new Audible edition, and to really give the listener a chance to kind of let the story read itself rather than them try to read it.
Thanks, Kurt. Now, I'm now a play-by-play announcer myself for a minor hockey team, but when I first picked up the Voices of Hockey like several years ago, I was researching for a hockey book that I was writing. I was looking for a quote from a broadcaster about a specific game, and your book came up, and I went through it. And at the time, I wasn't yet an announcer; I was just a writer, and so I don't think I fully appreciated what the book, The Voices of Hockey specifically, was really about. And I know you dedicated this book to your daughter, but I'm curious, like, who is this book truly for?
I think this book is truly for the broadcasters to kind of give them their voice. They already have their voice, but it's just so funny to me when I'm sitting there talking to other people, even sports fans, and I bring up broadcasters' names outside of like bringing up Vin Scully, Bob Costas, or Marv Albert, or even Joe Buck, maybe. Most of the time, they don't even know who I'm talking about. And I think that's a shame because a lot of these broadcasting voices, the communities that they broadcast in, they love them. A perfect description of this happened early in my interviewing for the Voices of Baseball. I was interviewing Eric Nadel of the Texas Rangers. He's a Hall of Fame broadcaster, has been with the team forever, and I was doing it in a spring training game down in Surprise, Arizona, where the Texas Rangers have their spring training. And he wasn't calling the game; he was just sitting with me in the seats, and we were right above this couple, and we were just having this conversation for a good 30, 40 minutes. And the whole time I was looking down at the couple. They were basically maybe one row down from us, but they were close enough that they could hear us talking. And I kept thinking, I hope we're not ruining this baseball experience for these people. I hope we're not ruining their game by just talking and talking, because that's what we were doing. Well, when the interview was done, Eric Nadel shook my hand and walked away, and the couple came up to me. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what is going to happen here? But then they started smiling at me and they said, we enjoyed your interview so much. We're Ranger fans. We immediately recognize Mr. Nadel. When does your book come out? And that moment right there, so early in the interview process, made me realize that I was on the right track with what I was trying to achieve by speaking for these individual markets and then putting them all together in a lump sum of representing every market in baseball. And then I did the same thing going into hockey as well.
Now that's very interesting, and that's the next question I was gonna mention, or the next topic I was gonna mention, because for sports, right? Whether it's baseball, whether it's hockey, we'll stick with hockey this time, but hockey is such a regional sport, same with baseball. And fans, for example, fans in Vancouver mostly care about watching the Canucks only, and in Boston, let's say, they care only about watching the Bruins. And it doesn't matter what market it is, people will insist that their hometown broadcaster is the best and everybody else is not good. I mean, that's what I find most of the time. And for me, when I was young, I didn't like Rick Jeanneret, mostly because of that May Day call, that famous May Day call in a game against my favorite team, the Bruins. So I'm curious now, were there any broadcasters that you didn't like growing up, but ended up changing your mind about maybe after talking to them? What was that like for you, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
Uh, I don't think that there was any broadcasters I didn't like, just teams I didn't like, because it's kind of like in your situation with Jeanneret calling against the Bruins, calling for the Sabres. Obviously, that is one of those things that's going down in infamy in your own personal experience. And I think that's what it is across the league. And that's why they hate the broadcasters, because they hate the team. They don't have any personal vendetta against these broadcasters. They just hate the team they broadcast for. And so they just want to have this hate on. And I never really hated any particular broadcaster, but I just did not like the Boston Red Sox, being a Yankees fan most of my life. And I did not like Colorado Avalanche, being a Red Wings fan most of my life. So I guess I was wondering going into those interviews, like, what are they going to share? And are they going to sit there and talk about this moment that I hated so bad? And how am I going to react in this interview when they're talking about stuff that I myself was not a fan of, basically because this is what you call Homerism, and you got to get rid of Homerism, because if you're writing a book about an entire league, you can't just sit there and relegate it to your favorite team and say, okay, nothing else matters. And so taking out that Homerism and appreciating what these broadcasters were able to call, even if it was at the expense of your favorite team, it brought me a whole new appreciation for a lot of these markets. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to be wearing Red Sox clothing and all that going into baseball games or anything like that, but I do have an appreciation for what they were able to accomplish by talking with people like Joe Castiglione, radio voice of the Red Sox Hall of Famer, and also talking with some of the Colorado Avalanche broadcasters like Mike Haynes, who's retired, a former Colorado Avalanche broadcaster, now St. Louis broadcaster, and son of Dan Kelly, John Kelly. Hearing their stories, I was able to kind of soak it in and say, you know what, hey, I can see how that would be such an awesome moment for that fan base. So I was able to take away my Homerism and have an appreciation and not be so biased.
We're speaking with Kirk McKnight, author of The Voices of Hockey, and now that makes more sense why the photo, the front cover photo of the original version has the picture of the Red Wings goalie Mike Vernon fighting the Colorado goalie Patrick Waugh. That's pretty neat. Now, Kurt, you mentioned earlier about having updated, the voices of hockey with newer broadcasters that you managed to interview. Did you notice any generational shifts in style? Let's say like how younger voices approach storytelling compared to the quote unquote old guard?
Yeah, you see, the thing is in the Voices of Baseball, the updated edition, uh, Vin Scully passed away the day after I submitted it. The day after I submitted the manuscript to the editor. So I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, I have to, I have to." It's kind of like the boat is still there in the bay. It's not left. It hasn't left the marina. What am I going to do? And I asked my editor, can I please have 2 weeks to to do something to commemorate, to honor Vin Scully? He was already plenty in the book because I interviewed him and in plenty of the chapters. And I already actually had a mini chapter dedicated to the living legends who are still alive. But I thought to myself, no, he's the greatest voice in sports history. And this is, the train hasn't left the station. So maybe I need to actually give the due diligence to it that is needed. And so I went back and interviewed a lot of the same broadcasters I started the second time around. And that's the thing, is that even the old time broadcasters and this generation, they basically have uh, that admiration of the old ones, and so they've been, broadcasting side by side with them in some instances, and so they're basically the changing of the guard, and so they're able to show how they were able to share these moments with these broadcasters, these legends. Charlie Steiner sharing a booth with Vin Scully back when Charlie Steiner, for the Dodgers, back when he was a little kid in Brooklyn and the Brooklyn Dodgers beat the Yankees, Vin Scully was the voice of the game, and Charlie Steiner caught the bug. And so there was no plan B for him. He wanted to be a broadcaster, and it was all because of Vin. And to be able to broadcast alongside Vin those last several years of his career was just gravy to an already praiseworthy career that he was able to have in ESPN with the Yankees and then with the Dodgers. So to answer your question, I think that the broadcasters are very appreciative. These young and upcoming broadcasters are very appreciative of even being in the same conversation as some of the other voices in this book. And they don't get ahead of themselves and get a little too, they don't get ahead of themselves and get too arrogant. For example, some of them I even asked, would you want to share a Vin story? And a couple of the younger ones just said, I have no business being in this chapter. I I I met I have I met Vin Scully and probably had 2 words with him, but there's no way that I'm going to even try to justify sharing any kind of story about that man, because that's how much reverence they held for him. And I think that goes across both sports. Just some kind of reverence for the voices of before, not trying to do too much different, but also trying to make a name for themselves and not actually becoming Vin Scully 2.0 or Doc Emmerich 2.0. Take a little bit of what they learned, take a little bit of what those guys did in their careers, and then apply it, but don't mimic it, don't parrot it.
Thanks for sharing that, Kirk. And what's interesting is we share the same publisher, Roman and Littlefield, and I'll share a little story about have asking for a 2 week extension for one of the books I was writing. And that's so funny that you mentioned it because I wrote a book about the 1988 LA Dodgers, and it was like the 30-year anniversary of their championship season. And the manuscript was due like November 1st, 2017, in preparation for to be released on the 30-year anniversary of the 88 Dodger championship. And of course, the Dodgers were playing in the World Series against Houston. and that World Series went into a seventh game, and manuscript was due, and I was kind of worried because I had written my book based on perspective that the championship drought of the Dodgers would continue beyond the 30 years, and there was a legitimate chance that the Dodgers were going to beat Houston in the seventh game of the World Series. So I had to write to my, editor at Roman and Littlefield and say, "Oh, is there a way to get an extension in case the Dodgers win Game 7? Because otherwise, a lot of the references that I made in that book are gonna be like wrong." So I was granted like a couple extra weeks to, make sure all the facts in the '88 Dodger book was accurate. And I want to say, fortunately, the Dodgers lost, so I didn't have to change anything. But, but when you mentioned Vin Scully and also mentioning like asking for an extension, of course, under much different circumstances, that kind of popped in my head, and thought I just wanted to share that with you, Kurt. But well, thanks for sharing, your answer on that. So the next thing I was gonna say then is like it could be the moment that you mentioned just now, but was there a moment during this project, whether it's writing, about the voices in hockey and the voices in baseball, was there any moment during your projects that hit you emotionally, like maybe a story that stayed with you?
I think talking to Vin Scully and getting 30 minutes of Vin Scully's life is something that will probably never be replicated for me. Just that experience to sit there, and especially now that he's gone, in the updated edition of the Voices of Baseball, like kind of stepped out of the storyteller third person perspective to become more first person, which is something I don't want to do in a book. I don't like doing that at all. But I felt like the moment called for it to kind of give that first person perspective of my own personal experience with Vin Scully. And the fact that when he called my house, I had been trying to get the Dodgers to get me access to him, and they just kept telling me he's very busy, very, very busy. He's in the middle of a season. And I thought, okay, that's fine. It's obviously Vin Scully, and he probably has a million people that try to talk to him. But it was in 2014, and the Dodgers, I think, had just lost to the Cardinals in the division series, if I'm not mistaken. And I reached out on my day off. I had the day off, and I sent an email out to the Dodgers. And around noon, lunchtime, not expecting it at all, my phone rings. I see it says Los Angeles. I answer the phone, and I hear the voice says, "Kirk there," and I know exactly who it is. So my heart stops a beat. I said, this is Kirk, kind of almost stuttering a little bit. He says, "Hi, Kirk. My name's Vin Scully, and I broadcast baseball for the Los Angeles Dodgers." And I said, "I know who you are." I said, "I knew who you were when you said hello." But that moment to me was a complete testament to the humility of somebody like that. Now, he's the greatest broadcaster in all of sports, and that's indisputable in the history of major sports. And the fact that he's calling somebody who said, I am doing a book, calling somebody who's doing a book on baseball broadcasting, asking to speak with him, and to basically call that person and introduce yourself, not only introduce yourself, but also say, "Yes, I broadcast baseball for the Los Angeles Dodgers." That to me showed Vin's unassuming nature, and to basically look back on those 30 minutes, I cherished every word that he said. Practically every word that he said is in the book at some point or another, whether it's on the Dodgers chapter or the Kirk Gibson home run as the introductory chapter of the book, or talking about old Ebbets Field and Polo Grounds. They're all in there, and those are 30 minutes of my life I'll never trade for anything ever in the world.
That's outstanding. We're speaking with Kirk McKnight, the author of the voices of hockey and also the voices of baseball. Now, in terms of preparation, because preparation is such a big thing for broadcasters. Like I said earlier, myself, I'm a at the amateur minor hockey level, a play-by-play announcer as well. I do a lot of prep work, but did any broadcaster surprise you with how they prepare? Like maybe a ritual or a habit that stuck with you?
Uh, could you repeat the question? How they
Right,
prepare?
how they prepare, like maybe like a habit that they do that kind of like has stuck with you in terms of how any broadcaster has surprised you with how they prepare for a game.
You know, a lot of times, um, one thing that kind of surprised me a little bit, and now it surprised me at first, but now it doesn't, was the fact that a lot of them don't prepare what they're going to say because they're afraid of coming off as corny. Um, and so I've heard several say that exact thing that they said, you don't know in the moment until that moment what you're going to say because you don't ever want anything to sound prepared. But then again, there are some times where a broadcaster has this foregone conclusion. Like if you're up 3 games to 1 and you're up 9 runs in the ninth inning, or if you're up 3 games to 1 and there's a minute and a half left and you're up 4 goals, you kind of are able to prepare and kind of gather in the moment. So, I think some broadcasters try to give the proper due diligence, I guess, to their call, knowing when it's coming, but also they try not to sound so contrived, and the organic nature of their voices in some of these moments that you don't expect. The David Freese home run, uh, and the other things like that in 2011 with the St. Louis Cardinals against the Texas Rangers. Those kinds of moments for Joe Buck, he said it himself. He said, I didn't know up until a fraction of a thousandth of a second what I was going to say. Now, if you were going to tell me that I would be calling this home run happening with the team that my dad called all his life, and to stave off elimination, and that I would say the exact same thing my dad said 20 years earlier when the Minnesota Twins had a walk-off home run win against the Atlanta Braves. He said, you'd be counting cards in Vegas, basically, because there's just no kind of preparation for this. So I think that's what kind of surprised me at first. And now I'm starting to realize that a true broadcaster wants the moment to be organic. They don't want it to sound like something that they just had prepared in a folded up sheet, like somebody accepting an award at the Oscars. They kind of want it to be organic and in the moment.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Kirk McKnight, for sharing all these stories and for hopping on. Now, we connected originally on LinkedIn, so we know you're on LinkedIn, but how can listeners connect with you and and stay up to date with your latest happenings?
Well, you can always find the book on Audible, but you can always find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at the Voices of Baseball, which is kind of funny because I'm really promoting hard the Voices of Hockey. But that's the best way to find me on social media. I'm on Facebook. If you ever want to follow me on Facebook, I usually share the link, maybe share some funny memes or pictures with people on social media that way. But just look up Kirk McKnight on Facebook or at the Voices of Baseball on Instagram.
Outstanding. So thanks again, Kirk McKnight, the author of The Voices of Hockey and The Voices of Baseball. And again, you can go to Instagram and find Kurt at The Voices of Baseball. Now, for other episodes of this podcast, you can check them out on your favorite podcast player, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many others. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again next time. And Kurt McKnight, thanks for hopping on, and all the best in your book sales.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on.